Hey guys, welcome back. So tonight I'm continuing work on these two Generac 4000XLs. I picked these up recently as non-running machines, and the hope was that by buying two broken ones, I could get one good one. And that's exactly what I did in the first video. The generator here on the left had no compression and was missing a bunch of parts. Come to find out, the lack of compression was due to a broken valve spring retainer. So what I did was I stole the retainer from this engine and moved it over there, as well as the airbox. And by the end of that video, we had a perfectly running machine doing exactly what it should. Anyway, fast forward to tonight, and I'm trying to figure out where to go with this one. At the time when I stole that valve spring retainer, I had assumed I could buy a new one for $5 or $10, but that part is discontinued. It's obsolete. So there's not too many options. I couldn't find it anywhere, new or used. But with that said, there is one option. Generac does make a valve kit, which comes with two new valves, valve springs, and valve retainers. But it is not compatible with the valves that are in there. So I just can't take the retainer from that kit and pop it on. I do need to get the head off and actually replace the valves, the springs, and the retainers. So that's what I'm going to do. That kit is on its way. So what I need to do is get basically everything off that's connected to the head and get that head uninstalled and cleaned up. And once we get that kit installed, my hope is to bolt on the original carburetor that came with this generator and give it a test to see if there's anything else wrong with this generator. If everything's looking good, I'll order a new carburetor because that one does have issues, and we'll replace the missing airbox. So let me get you set up a little bit better and get going on this thing. Yeah, a little bit of carbon buildup, but the cylinder itself looks to be in great shape. You can still see the original crosshatch pattern. Okay, that cleaned up pretty well. The really important thing is to get the head surface cleaned up where it's going to seal with the new head gasket. I also removed a majority of the carbon down here. That can break off and cause scoring in the cylinder. So I'm going to move on to the engine. We're going to get the carbon off the piston as well as the sealing surface on the engine. Okay, well, this showed up while I was cleaning the engine. So I'm going to get this opened up. We'll get the valves lapped in. We'll reassemble the head and then bolt it onto the engine. Beautiful. That's the way it should be. I did have to lap it about 4 more times before getting it to seat really good. Anyway, we'll get the valve springs on and the retainers. Actually, we also have a new valve stem seal. We'll get that on as well. got a bit of an upgrade. We got red springs. Anyway, the springs are the same on both sides, so it doesn't matter which way or which side it goes on. Same with the valve retainers and the keepers. The tapered side goes down, and what I find works best is usually the spring leans to one side, so if you put the first keeper in on the tight side, it'll usually stay in place while you're putting in the other. Just going to put a little assembly lube in the cylinder. All right, this is going to get torqued to 22 foot-pounds. The manual says start at 15 and then bring it up to 22. So there is a bit of a discrepancy as far as what the valve should be set to on this. According to the service manual, the intake should be around 1 or 2 thousandths and the exhaust 2 or 3. According to the owner's manual, it says set both of them between 2 and 4, which I like the sound of better. So I'm going to aim for probably the high side of 3 on both of these valves. Okay, perfect. Both valves are between 3 and 4 thousandths. So before putting the blower housing on, I do want to sand this magnet. It is rubbing, against this coil due to the rust. So I'll sand that a bit. I'm also going to sand the legs here on this ignition coil. Just make sure we have clearance without hitting the rust. All right, let's give it a quick start before bolting that exhaust on. Got the light hooked up and turned on. I'm just going to give it a squirt of starting fluid, and hopefully the engine fires up and the light comes on for a second. All right, not too bad. It fired right up and the light came on. So we're looking pretty good. I'm going to get the exhaust bolted on. I'll get that OEM carb that kind of works bolted on. We'll bring it out and do a little bit more testing. So you may have noticed this looks a lot better than it did when we started. I just used some Scotch-Brite and some WD-40 to kind of shine that up and remove some of the rust. And I think that would work on this as well, at least in this area. I think this rust is a little bit too severe. Now, I do have a lot of exhaust systems from the 9 and 10 horse Briggs engines, and it's not compatible with this, but this chrome on the front seems to be an exact match. So I'm going to try to get these bolts out, and assuming that works out, we'll move this one over to there. So in case you're wondering, I am going to omit the breather tube for now. It is pretty cracked and dry rot. This stuff's just going to get sucked into the engine. So I do need a new one of those. And I didn't really cover this, but the tank did have some issues. The tank was full of mostly water and some fuel. And surprisingly, even though it's a plastic tank, it had a bunch of rust on it, mostly due to this fuel cap. This piece here is the float for the fuel gauge, and someone actually painted the gauge black, so it's serving no purpose. But this here was in the water and caused a surprising amount of rust. Now, I'll show you it here, if it focuses. And you can see it doesn't look great. I've actually had this soaking now for about 24 hours in denatured alcohol. So I think we're about done. I just need to agitate it a bit, get that alcohol out, rinse it out with water, and probably drain it and repeat a few times. Yeah, it's a lot better, but I know there is still stuff down by the fuel outlet. That's what I got out right there. So I am going to bring it out anyway. Just throw some water in it, shake it around, try to kind of break up the stuff by the fuel filter that's inside the tank. Okay, I'm ready to give this thing a try. I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but this carb didn't run the other Generac too well. I did pull it apart again and actually found a pilot jet behind the main jet, which I neglected in the first cleaning. So that's been cleaned again. I think it'll run this a lot better, but I couldn't solve the leaky needle problem. So at a minimum, we need a new needle, and I'm leaning towards a clone on this one just because this carb is not in great shape, and a clone is about 20 bucks, and a new needle is probably half that. So let's get it started and see how it does. Sounds good. We're at about 120.7 volts, 63.3 hertz. A little fast. We'll slow that down in a second. We're at 61.4 hertz. That's good, 121 volts. Yeah, it's kind of what we saw last time I tried this on the other generator. The idle circuit's not working too well. Potentially I need to adjust the idle set screw, but from what I can see here, it actually looks in a decent position. But let me turn it in a few turns. We'll try this again. Okay, well, overall, not too bad considering where we started with this thing. You know, it starts, it runs, it makes power. Unfortunately, the idle circuit seems to be dead. That set screw is actually all the way in, and when it tries to idle down, it just falls on its face. So I do need to get a new carb ordered. I'll get the new breather as well, and the airbox, and then finish this thing up. But for now, since it's hot, we'll get it inside and drain that oil. Okay, I'm just going to show you real quick how to test your oil pressure switch. I was helping someone recently with a similar setup as this, and this one's different than most. This one actually has a pressure switch. Most generators have a float. Anyway, I've got the multimeter set to ohms, and one lead on the ground and the other lead on the switch itself. Right now we have no oil pressure, which is why we get a reading of about 1 ohm. And I'm going to pull the engine over a few times. Actually, probably more than a few times. I just changed the filter. But once we build pressure, this should be an open circuit telling us that the switch is good. And on my multimeter, that means open circuit. So we've now built up enough pressure to satisfy that oil pressure switch. And if we wait a minute, the pressure should go down and the connection will come back. And there it is. Give it another pull. And we got pressure again. And in case you're in a pinch and you need to bypass the low oil system on this, you just unplug this connector right here and it should start right up. Okay, all the parts I've been waiting for have arrived. So I'm going to bolt this stuff all on and we'll get it back outside. All right, all set up here to test out this carb. I do have the fuel hooked up and it's been turned on a few minutes. No leaks, so we're off to a good start. Let's get it running and see how it does. Not too bad, 62 and a half, 120.3. Very nice. I'm always impressed with these engines, how long they take to run out of fuel once you disconnect it. I mean, it was a good 4 minutes. Anyway, this thing did pretty well. I mean, it started right up. It idled without issue. You know, after it warmed up, it was burning off some oil in the exhaust, but that cleared up after a few minutes. I think the shocking thing here was what it did under a 3,000 watt load. You know, the voltage dropped to about 110 volts. This has an AVR. It should be doing a better job maintaining that voltage. And also the engine speed, it was low. You know, it was around 58 hertz, maybe a bit below. You know, I would have been happier at 59. You know, but I did bump the governor to open up the throttle a bit more, and it had no problem getting back up to 62 hertz. So it's not an engine issue. It's most likely a governor sensitivity issue. So I think I'm going to move that spring a little bit closer to the governor shaft and see if that improves the speed drop at all. You know, also, there is an adjustment for the voltage here. There was a rubber plug covering this up, and you can actually get a screwdriver through it, but I pulled it out just to get kind of easier access. But that is the potentiometer there. I believe turning it counterclockwise will bring the voltage up, so that's what I'm going to do. Shooting for something closer to 125 volts with no load, and then we'll load it up and see how the engine and voltage does. All right, I adjusted the voltage again, closer to 125. We're at 62.5 hertz. Let's load it up. Yeah, that's better. 115 volts, 58.7. Yeah, that was much better. We're now within range. The voltage and the engine speed is kind of doing what it should. So I think I'm done. You know, this generator, I wasn't sure I was going to fix it. It was in rough shape, but I'm glad I did. You know, I like the Generac XL line. They are built well, but they are getting up there in years. Anyway, I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.